Hi there, I'm Brandon Walker. Time now for a look back at our top stories of the week. A federal grand jury handed down an indictment for businessman Randy Farrell, the owner of the largest building inspection company in the state. Farrell faces 25 counts on charges that appear to implicate Mayor LaToya Cantrell in a conspiracy, although the mayor was not specifically named in the indictment. Chief Investigative Reporter David Hammer has the latest.
The indictment of businessman Randy Farrell alleges massive permitting fraud affecting the safety of electrical work at dozens of properties around town.
The allegations here are that Mr. Farrell was using licensed electricians to get permits for work actually being performed by unlicensed electricians. And there's some specific allegations involving some specific properties about the safetiness of that work, right? Including an allegation that some of the work was unsafe that was being done, so much so that the homeowner had to hire a separate licensed electrician to come in and do it.
Former federal prosecutor Matt Chester says those safety concerns are the most important part of the indictment. But the headlines will be about the allegations of corruption involving top city officials. Public official one, who is Mayor LaToya Cantrell. She is clearly referenced in here, and she is referenced in here as a unindicted co-conspirator, right? So she is brought into these charges in a substantive way without actually being named as a defendant. And public official two, whose sources confirm is the mayor's second in command, Gilbert Montano.
Gilbert Montano, assuming he's public official two, is actually implicated in this in maybe a half step or a step even more substantively than the mayor. The indictment uses a treasure trove of text messages between Farrell and his business partner Fuad Ziton, another convicted felon and friend of Mayor Cantrell. It alleges in 2018 and 2019, Farrell spent a total of $9,200 on gifts for the mayor. NFC championship game tickets, a lunch at Ruth's Chris, a new iPhone. Each time, Farrell texted with Ziton to get Cantrell to fire Jennifer Cecil, a city official who was investigating Farrell for falsifying electrical permits. He is actively trying to get her removed through businessman one, which is Ziton, right? A few days later, when Cecil was informed she was fired, the indictment says Farrell sent Ziton an image saying, quote, "The bitch is gone." And then the indictment says Ziton texted Cantrell and said, "Thank you so much for handling safety and permit problem." In addition to Cantrell, the indictment alleges Chief Administrative Officer Gilbert Montano asked Ziton to get him tickets for the 2020 College Football National Championship game in the Superdome won by LSU. The indictment says Farrell paid $3,600 for those tickets. We reached Montano by phone. He said he was blindsided to learn he was implicated in 2 criminal counts and didn't even have a criminal defense lawyer. He admitted he ended up in a suite at the national championship game, but denied he would ever do someone a favor in exchange for tickets.
It's discouraging. You spend all these years trying to fix and make something better, and to be in the same conversation that I would sell my integrity and my hard work and all my ethics for tickets.
Now, in addition to Gilbert Montano, I spoke to Mayor Cantrell's criminal defense attorney, Eddie Castang. He declined to comment, but made it a point to emphasize the mayor has not been charged with a crime. Randy Farrell's attorney, Rick Simmons, sent a statement strongly denying the allegations. It says, in part, Mr. Farrell provided documentation of his payment for a birthday luncheon for Fuad Ziton and his 2 nephews, at which public official one was an invited guest of the businessman. The prosecution is now improperly utilizing this information against Mr. Farrell, alleging it was a bribe. Mr. Farrell did nothing more than complain to city leaders about the dysfunction of the Department of Safety and Permits, a right that he and all citizens have under the First Amendment.
After nearly a century, a New Orleans family says they finally have closure now that their loved one, a World War II Marine, will be laid to rest. Private Randolph Edwards left for the war overseas and was never heard from again. This week, that ocean of distance is no more after his family laid Mr. Edwards to rest. Eleanor Tabone reports.
For 82 years, the Edwards family never knew what happened to their son, to their uncle, to their friend. Private Randolph Ray Edwards travelled across the globe to fight for his country during World War II.
First of all, he volunteered to join the 7th Marines because he wanted action. And he arrived at Guadalcanal in September 18th of 1942. 6 days later, he lost his life.
But Private Edwards never touched back down on American soil.
There was 10 Marines that lost their lives in this particular engagement, and they were buried in 2 different hills at the time. Men in the platoon actually drew a map of who was buried where on these 2 hills, but there were no coordinates.
The 23-year-old's family yearning for answers.
His father spent years writing letters to the Defense Department, wanting to know where was his son and wanting his son's remains brought home.
His father pleading for help to find his son.
Letter after letter, basically said the same thing, that, they, up until that point, they hadn't been able to identify.
For 82 years, generations of the Edwards family came and went, but this once young private remained lost.
And unfortunately, his remains weren't found until somewhere between 2016, 2018, but weren't identified until May of this year.
Bill Allerton with Greenwood Cemetery says thanks to advancements in science, DNA connected Private Edwards to his living family.
It's taken all these years for him to come home.
While solemn, nearly a century on, the family got the answers they'd been waiting for.
I know his family wanted him to be laid to rest.
Private Edwards is Jeremy Edwards' great-great-uncle. He and his mother sat by the gravesite, witnessing the long-awaited moment the missing private's remains were laid to rest.
They weren't able to find his body at the time, and we're just really grateful that they were finally able to do that for us.
Finally, Private Randolph Edwards is again by his father's side. The father who spent years searching for him, a father who never gave up hope, and a son who only ever wanted to serve his country together again. Eleanor Tabone, WWL, Louisiana.
The longest-serving high school principal in America is the subject of a new documentary on Louisiana Public Television. Chalmette High School's Wayne Warner is recovering from a brutal attack and robbery that happened back in June. Now he's speaking about that day for the first time since the attack. He spoke with our Paul Murphy about his injuries and the long road to recovery, also how he feels about coming home to Chalmette High.
Are you coming back next year?
I'm going to be back in some way, shape, or form, I'm sure.
Wayne Warner has been a beloved fixture at Chalmette High School for 58 years, the last half-century as principal.
Before you do something, think about what the consequences will be. Hopefully it'll be good consequences.
On Sunday, June 23rd, shortly after 8 p.m., the consequences of a series of events were not good for Principal Warner. He says he was driving down Palmetto Street when he came across a man in a wheelchair, turning over trash cans and taking mail from people's mailboxes. Warner got out of his car and asked the man if he needed some help.
When I said, "Can I help you?" he got very angry and he hit me. He punched me in the chest, which made me go backwards, and unfortunately broke my hip and my elbow.
A short time later, sheriff's deputies arrested 33-year-old Christopher Kidd. He was booked with second-degree robbery, simple battery of the infirm, and other charges. Warner's injuries required 5 surgeries. He also spent 4 weeks in the hospital and is now going to rehab 2 or 3 times a week. He told me being back at Chalmette High, even on a part-time basis, is good therapy.
I enjoy watching television, but I can only watch so much television. I have to talk to people and be with people.
Longtime friend and Chalmette High Cultural Arts Director Charles Cassar says Warner defines the term servant leadership.
It's who he's been. It's who he is. He is Chalmette High School.
In true Wayne Warner fashion, he asked me not to make this whole story about him. He didn't want to pass up an opportunity to brag on Chalmette High and the many dedicated teachers, staff, and students here.
a graduation class of about 500 last year, and out of that class we had $15 million worth of scholarships. Nobody ever hears about that.
At 80 years old, Warner admits he has some decisions to make about his future at Chalmette High. But for now, he's back where he belongs, shaping young lives, one student at a time. Paul Murphy, WWL, Louisiana.
Yet another shocking twist in the case of accused child rapist and former priest Lawrence Hecker. On the morning of Hecker's trial, it was set to begin. Judge Benedict Willard stepped down after a year of overseeing that case. Chief investigative reporter David Hammer has more behind the judge's surprise move.
Benedict Willard was first elected as a criminal court judge 22 years ago, but his actions in 2 high-profile rape cases in just the last 2 months have led to calls for his ouster.
I think that he doesn't deserve to be a judge. If he's going to allow his personal emotions and feelings to get in the way of his duties and responsibilities as a judge.
Judicial watchdog Raphael Goyeneche of the Metropolitan Crime Commission.
There have been incidents going back a couple of decades with Judge Willard, and these are 2 of the most recent and most egregious that are played out.
The first recent incident was August 21st during the rape trial of Freddie Sterling. Court records indicate a male juror came on to a female member of the district attorney's office. When he was notified, Judge Willard ordered the DA's employee removed, calling her a, quote, distraction.
The first assistant comes to court to defend his prosecutor because the judge said, get that distraction, that attractive female, out of court in the middle of a trial.
That first assistant DA is Ned McGowan. A court transcript shows McGowan asked Judge Willard to put on the record why he ordered the woman removed, and Willard had McGowan removed.
Ned McGowan calls the judge a coward as he's being removed from the court. The appropriate response, in my opinion, is that you remove that juror and appoint one of the alternates. The case ultimately went to the jury, and it was a hung jury.
Then came yesterday. The long-awaited rape trial of pedophile priest Lawrence Hecker was about to begin. After a year presiding over the case and 8 trial delays, Willard went after McGowan again for, quote, disrespect. Then the judge abruptly stepped down from the Hecker case. Outside court, Assistant DA Andre Godin likened the judge's actions to Hecker's admitted abuse of his authority over kids.
And now we have another person with authority who has, through their decision on the morning of trial to make a recusal, caused a massive delay.
Aaron Hebert is one of Hecker's alleged victims. He, too, is frustrated with Judge Willard.
He should have recused himself a month or so ago when all this came up about, holding the assistant DA in contempt. This is just another way of putting everything off. It's a way of the victims and survivors are once again hurt again.
Hebert wants Willard voted out of office in 2026. Goyeneche says that's hard to do if nobody runs against him, and in Willard's 3 previous elections, nobody has.
I believe his conduct should be reviewed by the Office of Special Counsel with respect to whether he violated some of the judicial canons. I believe that his conduct is a violation of some of the judicial canons.
David Hammer, WWL, Louisiana.
The search for a 17-year-old accused of escaping the city's juvenile justice complex and carjacking a 72-year-old woman ended this week with a rearrest in Baton Rouge. That escape happened despite lawmakers passing legislation meant to tighten regulation on juvenile offenders. It also mandates a quick response to notify the public of the danger, something Orleans District Attorney Jason Williams says did not happen. Investigative reporter Mike Pearlstein reports.
WWL Louisiana had this exclusive story last summer showing video of the escape by juvenile offender Curtis Tassin. Months later, we revealed that more than a week passed before the public was notified about the escape of Lionel Reynolds, who was eventually captured in Texas.
Your story caused me to look at what was happening and draft a law to have notifications done immediately. Don't protect the juvenile, protect the public.
After our reporting, State Senator Patrick Connick of Marrero passed a law requiring authorities to notify the public about juvenile escapes within 10 minutes. The law took effect on August 1st, but when 17-year-old inmate Carlos Taylor bolted from New Orleans Juvenile Court Monday, the public was not notified for about 2 hours, long after Taylor carjacked a woman at the nearby LSU Dental School. The victim was 72-year-old Barbara Lane Golly, a local singer and piano player who performs under the stage name Barbie Lane. She was in this parking lot at the dental school when the carjacker appeared out of nowhere, accosted her, and demanded her keys. Golly told WWL Louisiana her car was recovered Tuesday, badly wrecked and missing much of her piano equipment and sheet music. Connick said the carjacking never should have happened.
If he escapes, you got to notify within 10 minutes. And that wasn't done. The law was designed to protect the public when there's an escape of a juvenile from any facility, from anywhere. We got to pound it in their heads that this is what has to take place when something like this occurs again.
With criticism coming from Governor Jeff Landry and Attorney General Liz Muriel, the city issued a statement Tuesday that the juvenile lockup, quote, will be restricting juvenile movement until a thorough security assessment and investigation is completed. Mike Perlstein, WWL, Louisiana.